Imagine a dimly lit room in Washington, its walls lined with ticking instruments and the faint smell of oil lamps hanging in the air. Wires snake out of the building in every direction, north, south, east, and west, carrying messages faster than any horse or courier ever could. This was the War Department Telegraph Office, a place that hummed day and night with the sound of war. And standing in the middle of it all was Abraham Lincoln. Here, he was not just the president, not just the politician from Illinois. In this room, Lincoln became a general without rank, a commander without a sword. He paced the floor, hat pushed back on his head, waiting for the tap-tap of incoming reports from the front lines. Every battle, every casualty list, every plea from his generals came rushing through these wires. The nation's fate, at times, was decided not in the roar of cannon fire, but in the quiet of this office, where Lincoln bent over scraps of paper, scribbling out replies. The Civil War was the first truly modern conflict, and in many ways, its most powerful weapon wasn't the rifle or the cannon, but the telegraph. For Lincoln, those wires became lifelines, stretching across a fractured nation. And it was here, in these rooms filled with the chatter of Morse code, that the president fought his own private war, the Telegram War. Before we move forward, a quick note: these images are artistic interpretations, not exact recreations. I'm here to tell the story, not make a documentary. If you're enjoying the way we bring these forgotten moments to life, consider subscribing. It helps keep the history flowing. The telegraph was still a marvel in Lincoln's day. Barely 2 decades old, it had already begun to shrink the vast American landscape into something smaller, more connected. What once took weeks by courier could now travel in minutes along copper wires. When the Civil War broke out, both the Union and the Confederacy scrambled to harness this new power. But the advantage lay firmly with the North. The Union's sprawling railroads carried not only men and supplies, but also telegraph poles and lines, hundreds upon hundreds of miles of them. The South, by contrast, was far less connected, its lines scattered and often unreliable. Lincoln recognized this difference almost immediately. To him, the telegraph wasn't just a tool for sending orders, it was a weapon of war. Speed of communication meant speed of command, and in war, speed could mean survival. While his generals trudged across muddy fields or waited for messengers on horseback, Lincoln could sit in Washington and know, sometimes within hours, where armies stood and how battles raged. The telegraph had given the president something no American leader had ever possessed before: the power to direct a war in real time. Lincoln was not content to sit back and wait for filtered reports. Instead, he planted himself right in the War Department telegraph office, often late into the night. The operators remembered his tall figure hunched over the wooden desks, reading message after message as soon as they arrived. Most presidents would have let generals interpret the news. Lincoln wanted the raw words, the unvarnished truth. He read the victories, the defeats, and the pleas for reinforcements directly from the wires. Sometimes he drafted replies on the spot, shaping the movements of entire armies with a few carefully chosen sentences. Other times he simply waited, pacing back and forth, hat in hand, until the next message clicked in. This was not common in his time. The Confederate leadership, scattered and slower, often waited days to receive word from their armies. Lincoln, by contrast, could intervene in real time. His generals might not have liked it, but through those wires, the president had become an active commander in his own right. The wires carried the pulse of the war, and with them, Lincoln's hopes and fears. At Antietam, he waited for word on whether McClellan would finally press the Confederates after the bloodiest single day in American history. At Gettysburg, telegrams told him that Meade had held the high ground, but Lincoln fumed when no message came of pursuit. And as Sherman marched to the sea, the telegraph became the thread that tied a daring campaign to the safety of the Union. Each message from the front carried the weight of the nation's survival. Operators recalled Lincoln's reactions, his sighs, his jokes to ease the tension, and the way his eyes darkened when casualty numbers rolled in. He was not detached. He lived every report as if it were happening before him. Through these wires, Lincoln was more than a distant president. He was present in the war itself, connected to every movement, every outcome, every soldier's fate. For Lincoln, the telegraph office was more than just a command post. It became his refuge. The White House was crowded, full of visitors, politicians, and endless demands. But just across the street, in the War Department's dim telegraph room, Lincoln found a different kind of space. Quiet, focused, and filled with men who were not there to debate policy, but to simply pass along the coded heartbeat of the war. The operators, many of them young men barely in their 20s, grew accustomed to the tall figure who slipped in at all hours. Sometimes he arrived barefoot, slippers on his feet, coat slung loosely over his shoulders. He would lower himself into a chair, unfold a telegram, and read in silence, his face shifting from hope to worry, from resolve to exhaustion. And yet, he rarely let the tension of those moments break the human bond. He told stories, shared jokes, and often scribbled notes in his own hand, sometimes to generals, sometimes simply as reminders to himself. One operator recalled Lincoln laying a heavy hand on his shoulder after a grim report and saying softly, "Well, my boy, we've got our work cut out for us." It was here, away from the pomp of politics, that Lincoln revealed his truest self, a man deeply burdened by war, yet unwilling to lose his humanity in the noise of it. The telegraph office preserved him, even as the war consumed him. The Civil War is often remembered for its blood and its battles, the rifles, the cannons, the endless lines of marching men. But it was also the first war of wires, the first great conflict where information moved faster than armies themselves. Lincoln was the first American president to grasp what that meant. Through the telegraph, he was no longer a distant leader, waiting for couriers. He was a commander with immediate vision, able to steer the course of campaigns in real time. That power changed the very shape of leadership. It also set a precedent that still echoes today. From command bunkers in World War II, to war rooms in the Cold War, to modern presidents with digital screens and instant intelligence, the seed of it all lay in Lincoln's nightly walks to the telegraph office. By mastering this new technology, he gave the Union an edge the Confederacy could never match. And in doing so, he showed that wars are not only won with armies, they are won with information, with speed, and with the courage to act on both. So when we picture Lincoln in war, it is not only the speeches at Gettysburg or the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation we should remember. It is also the image of a weary man, sitting in a dim room of clicking machines, reading the fate of a nation line by line, and fighting his own war through the wires. And so we return to that dimly lit room in Washington, where the click of Morse code never stopped and Lincoln's shadow stretched long across the floor. Here, in the hum of wires, the president fought his quiet war. Waiting, reading, deciding. The Civil War was not only a clash of armies, but also of information. The Union had the steel, the numbers, and the industry, but it also had a president who understood the power of connection. Through the telegraph, Lincoln reached across the battlefield, closing the distance between himself and his soldiers, binding the Union tighter than the Confederacy could ever imagine. When we think of Lincoln, we often picture him at Gettysburg or with quill in hand, signing the Emancipation Proclamation. But we should also remember the Lincoln who leaned over a telegram in the silence of midnight, carrying the weight of every soldier, every family, every decision. It was in those moments, alone with the wires, that Abraham Lincoln became not just the President of the United States, but the first truly modern wartime leader. And if stories like this help you see the Civil War in a new light, consider subscribing. There are so many more forgotten moments waiting to be told.